Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart-to-heart conversations about their day-to-day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. Welcome to the Healers Café, and today I have with me Jack Blackwell. And he's a respected leader in the field of family constellation work with 15 years of experience leading healing events and training facilitators. As the founder of Healing Family Trauma, Jack offers a wealth of resources and guidance to those seeking healing and resolution in their lives. And without going into greater detail, but you do ancestry work, generational patterns, all of that. So I think we're just going to start with, well, welcome. And my typical question is, how did you get drawn to this work? What happened?
Yeah, well, thank you, Manon. I appreciate it, being here. And I would say for me, I was a flight attendant. I was a flight attendant for 10 years,
Okay.
and it was we don't have to go into the story, but I had an extremely traumatizing childhood. So we have the healer's journey story, and then I was a flight attendant for about 10 years, but it wasn't in my heart anymore. I knew I wanted. I felt like I was having to leave my essence at the door when I got onto an airplane
Mm,
and then go back home to my kind of more spiritual, deeper elements of who I was. And it felt out of integrity for
mm,
me. So I
mm.
was looking for something and I didn't know what it was. And I was at a weekend workshop with a man named Colin Tipping, a book called Radical Forgiveness, and led a
Right.
3 or 4 day events. And I had an astounding breakthrough
Mhm,
doing a process called breath work.
mhm,
And on this same weekend, I decided, you know what? I am being asked by Spirit to actually let go of the flight attendant job
mhm,
and trust that the new thing will show up. I had
mhm.
been clinging to the flight attendant job, waiting for the new thing.
Right.
And on that weekend, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm gonna quit. I'm letting go. The next time they offer a buyout, I'm done, and I'll find my thing. On this same weekend, I did a 1 hour process called breathwork.
Mhm,
So he called it Satori breathing. He had loud, shamanic type music playing, deeper and faster in breath. And all you do is trust what comes up.
mhm,
And I was absolutely astounded, had perhaps the most powerful experience I had had in my life.
mm.
And what I was grokking at kind of this deep cellular level was that my mother didn't do anything wrong.
Mm,
And then it shifted, and tears were coming down my face. And I was a mess. And then I realized I didn't do anything wrong either. And I was just having these cathartic releases
mm,
through this breathwork process. And for the next couple of weeks, I kept coming back to that moment. I was like, wow. Like I realized that healing in today's time has to happen faster, right? We
mm,
don't have a lot of, I don't believe we have as much time. I believe there's so much frenetic energies
mhm,
that we need to maximize when we have the time, when we have the money
mm.
to invest in our healing. And and so I thought, well, I want to learn how to do what this process that I just went through, and that really began. I was already very very spiritual, but that really began my journey into the healing arts.
Mhm.
And then about a year later, I first experienced constellation work.
Okay. Wow. So maybe if you could share, there might be some people who are not that familiar with what constellation work is. Can you sort of like give an overview, and what's the part that you really relate to, that you enjoy the most
Mm.
about it?
Mm. Yes, family constellation work can be done one on one
Hmm.
or in a group setting.
Hmm.
And it is basically a way of working energetically with the patterns that are in our family system. If mom was depressed, if dad was an angry alcoholic, if grandma was resentful. And so all of these energies in our family system, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, going way back, the Native Americans say 7 generations. I've seen it go back farther at times. Are energies that we inherit when we come in as a little baby. Um, and I think a lot of people, don't realize that, and I think it's pretty important. Our social narrative is that we're basically an infant, and we come in and we're a blank slate at that point, and everything that happens to us is basically childhood experience, and whether that's childhood trauma, whether that's childhood of strength, whatever it is, that's what we work on. That's where the healing is. That's where the movements are. That's where the shifts are. But I think you and I know that there are times when people can go 20, 30 years and not resolve an issue.
Yeah.
And my belief is, listen, if we're working on something for 30 years and we haven't resolved it, something else is going on, right? There's something else going on. These struggles we've had for, our entire lifetime. And from 15 years of constellation work, what I really kind of believe now, these are made up numbers, but this is just the best guess for me. Yeah, we're about 40% childhood trauma, and about maybe, let's say, 40% of our problems and challenges come from that. But we're not a blank slate as an infant. We have inherited the family patterns. We have inherited the family energies. And if the family is super traumatized, that's the energy we inherit. And I think that's about 30% of our struggles. And I also believe another big portion of our struggles are past life struggles. So it's an energetic process that allows us to shift and heal the generational patterns that we carry from our family systems.
Yeah, no, I like how you put that. But that's, I mean, certainly it's been my experience. Again, I've learned tons from my patients when I was in practice, but they would know that it would be safe to say, I've carried this for at least 2 generations. And, when I was beginning my practice, I was open, otherwise I couldn't have heard it, but I didn't know what they meant at the beginning, and then the more that I included that seriously in my overall understanding, and that it shifted and changed, the more I understood that the way we've been brought up to see the world isn't correct.
It's missing big pieces.
Yeah, big pieces, and so
and some people intuitively know that, and I didn't have that awareness either. Some people intuitively, particularly the feminine, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm carrying my mother's grief. I feel like I'm carrying my grandmother's heartbreak. I feel like I'm carrying my father's rejection. He always felt like a rejected child, and I always feel rejected. Yeah. And so how can we work that? And most people try to work with that psychotherapeutically. And I've been in therapy for 10 years. I know it's an awesome tool and I love it. It's helped me a lot, but it does not work very well at this level.
No,
does not.
No, it's
talking about it won't get anything done.
Yeah, it's too 3D. It's like a lot of kind of the way a lot of physical therapy doesn't include, like I do Bowen therapy, which is at least the version I have been doing, includes trauma work, right? So then you can go much deeper. But if you're just looking at the body in the 3D levels, whether it's mentally or physically, we're not getting the whole picture. There's so much more, so it's exciting.
Yeah. And can we use this? Can we use medicine work? I'm not a medicine work practitioner, but I've had the experience of working with these shamanic medicines from South America, etc. And those are powerful energetic tools. So it's working at a very different level of what we are. And it's almost like a room that never gets dusted. We go into a room and it hasn't been dusted in a year, and we do one wipe across, and we're like, oh my God, what a difference that makes. And because this energetic level doesn't get addressed very much in our culture and society, when we do it, it's like we can really have these aha transformative experiences.
So I'm quite curious, if you want to go there. In the last 3 years have brought up a lot of family dynamics. So people who may have been getting along more or less, or thinking they were getting along. Um, I know because I've led a few groups and it's gone, to pots because
Yeah.
of, I mean, there's most massive propaganda campaign ever to separate people, to guilt people, to shame people, to blackmail people, to it goes on and on. So there's tons going on. But I've seen it really, the biggest number of people who won't speak to each other or who are triggered continually. And you could say, well, it's all caused from that. Now, that was definitely a provoker of it. But
Mm-hmm.
is it your understanding that all of that was already there before in the idea of the family constellations, that we probably came in with a history unknown, and then this provoked the obvious, I don't know, it may not be your perspective, but I'm wondering, how do
Yeah.
you see that?
Well, do you remember? I don't know if it maybe because I'm a boy, but we had a thing called ant farms. When I was a kid, I had an ant farm, and you could put the
Okay.
little. It was a little, almost like a little thing, and you could see the glass. You could see both sides. You put sand in it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, I do,
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
know
yeah.
what you mean, yeah.
And you could put, and
Yeah.
you have ants, and they would dig little tunnels,
Right,
and
right.
you could actually watch and observe their processes.
Mhm, mhm.
And they've done these experiments where you have the red ants and the black ants, and they put them in, and they both build. They both build their little homes and tunnels, and they coexist. But if you take that ant farm and you shake it up, the red ants and the black ants will attack one another.
Mhm, mhm.
Will
Yeah,
attack one another,
yeah.
and I almost feel like really, people have many, many thoughts on Trump. Love him, dislike him, hate him. Uh, I'm going to take a neutral stance, but certainly since 2016, it
Mm,
feels like the pressure cooker of social trauma
yeah.
has been dramatically ratcheted up, and we've seen, as you mentioned, like this break in families. Like, oh, one person likes the Democrats, one person likes the
Yeah.
Republicans, and the heat has been we're like those ants in
Right.
this
Or
ant
even
farm.
there's the big P politics. There's also this I'll just call it a bioweapon because that's what it is. But,
Yeah.
this whole idea of, doing it for the other and keeping everyone safe, and then other people becoming more aware that this is part of a bigger picture. I mean, that alone has broken up families. I'm in Canada, so
Yes.
it's a little different with Democrat. We have only one party. We call it several, but it's I think we're run by the World Economic Forum
Mm-hmm.
directly. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a few puppets in between. But yeah, for us, the medical thing was huge here, and
Yeah.
it really divided um, families and friends and that's what I was thinking more on that level. Does that
Yeah.
must have deeper roots that are just being shown up, do you think, or not? Or is this
Well,
a trauma in and of its own?
I'll share this. I led very traditional family constellations for 12 years. And before that, I had my breathwork practice, which I let go of about 7 or 8 years ago. And I was working with a particular client. I was working with this client 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And traditional constellation, mom's trauma, grandmother's trauma, giving the trauma back, working the energetic patterns to have these big soul shifts in perspective, where all of a sudden, for the first time, we have compassion for our mother and we actually feel her love.
Mm,
Those types of shifts, which I've had in my own
yeah.
uh, experience of constellation work, and has radically shifted my life in a way that nothing in talk therapy has ever been able to do.
Mhm.
Was working with this one particular client, and dark dark kind of malevolent energy came into the field. And I had worked sometimes with curses. It was somewhat rare, but you would see curses in a family and it would show up in the lineage as being impactful on the client. And this one time, just this malevolent force showed up, and I, I I didn't know if this was real. I didn't know if this was projection because, we're always trying to guard against our projections as humans and make sure we're as clean as we can be.
Mhm.
And these beings were in this lineage, and this was a very devastated lineage. And I have a whole nother perspective on dark forces and truly devastated lineages. And by truly devastated, because there's always trauma, we're
Mhm.
talking about the murders, we're talking about genocides, we're talking about sexual abuse everywhere. Every lineage has sexual abuse also, but it's just rampant.
Yeah.
Every generation has sexual abuse.
Mm.
I now see that there are malevolent forces in play, and that
Mm.
I didn't know it at the time, but I've come to truly believe that these forces are real.
What
And
would your life be like if you were pain free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
and what I'm seeing is, as I'm working with these lineages, like, oh, and I can share my own story. The constellation that changed my relationship with my mother was relevant again to dark forces.
Mm.
But we see, oh, great, 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 great grandparents were part of a cult, and there were
Mm.
sacrifices, and they invited these dark beings in for power or for vengeance, or
Right.
just sometimes to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes with mental insanity. And so they get into the lineage, and then these energies
Mm.
get passed down, and they have an entry point
Mm.
into us and into our family system. And they cause havoc. They wreak havoc.
Mm.
Sometimes they're the voices in our heads. Sometimes the
Yeah.
voices in our heads are not ours. They're
Yeah.
not ours. There's something that's messing with us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you share that. Like when we first got on, I was saying I had an experience of seeing really, it was like a snake-like energy that was in this person's field. And in when you do homeopathy, you look at the whole person, but it's
Mhm.
like, so the whole person had, and in homeopathy, you go with symptoms, better by this, worse by this, whatever. This entity was so strong, it had its own symptoms. And so
Wow.
instead of giving the whole picture, it was almost like an acute within a chronic, to give it another another understanding, but it had to be dealt with. And
Yes.
so we ended up using also breath work to literally pull it out and yeah, and dissipate it. And the pain associated with it went down from about a 9 to a 3. So significant shift.
Mhm.
But I've never experienced anything like that. So clear. Like it's interesting, and I don't know. I think one thing, the veil is getting thinner. I think that's one
Yes.
thing. Our awakening is becoming more massive, and the frequency is raising. So I think it's like between all of that, the work we do translates differently. We get to learn things we maybe wouldn't have seen or understood.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
evil, I was so convinced theoretically that evil is not possible. I always thought that it was a question of lack of compassion, that if you could just become more compassionate, you would understand why people would do certain things. And therefore, to me, nobody was really at fault because everyone was somehow driven by something that was trauma based one way or another. And
Yeah, yeah, that everything comes from trauma, right? That's
yeah,
a there's the belief of many that there's just inner darkness, and I get that belief. I understand that belief, and what I've seen from 3 years of working with
yeah,
these families, because that's now who I'm attracting are beings, humans who have a sense, maybe it's even unconscious, like, oh,
mhm,
Jack can help because there is malevolence in my lineage. There was a
right,
genocide, and things went really, really, really
yeah,
bad for my people. But that's who I'm attracting now, and I even see that socially,
yeah,
that what I hear from these beings, and so their inner trauma. We have our own darkness. I fully believe that, but I also believe that there are external dark
yeah,
forces, dark beings, etc.
yeah.
And
Now I do, but I
yeah,
didn't before. I didn't, and now I believe that I can see it
yeah.
now.
Yeah,
It's true.
like the snake thing you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm seeing that in half the constellations I'm leading now.
uh,
Whether it's snake, whether it's a malevolent kind of these beings called reptilians, which is a come through with a dark sexual energy many times, and shame and an arrogance, like an extreme arrogance through their energy. Um, Powerful. I have nothing but respect, and what I've really learned on a much deeper level, a much deeper soul level, is they're actually a part of human evolution.
mhm,
They
mhm.
are a part of the human journey, and they've been very hidden, very hidden.
Yeah,
And it is the time, it seems, of kind of some sort of a final conflict, final awakening.
mhm, mhm.
And I think we see this in society. I think the nonstop wars, I think the media, I've really, for myself, experienced that the media is very deceptive, and there are a lot of things that the media will not talk about.
Mhm.
And as I started to view independent sources, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, how come the media never talks about this? Seems like a really big issue. But then you see on both sides of the aisle, Fox and
Mhm, mhm.
CNN,
Oh,
and none of them will speak about certain topics.
yeah.
Um, and my personal journey right now, Manon, is simply raising my vibration. I am focused so often on light because it's the thing that I think protects us. I think it's the thing that we need in society right now as a species, as a peoples, is each one of us waking up.
Mhm.
Whether we wake up to light or dark, I don't know that that matters so much, but waking up and raising our own inner vibration to bring as much light to the planet as possible at this time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I agree with you, and it's a journey, right? Because
Yeah.
um, I don't know about you, but I know that when I became aware that we're in a genocide that is being not discussed and, you know, falsified and all this. I mean, all the truth is coming out now. Um, and it's not really yet full blast on the normal medias or whatever, but I don't think it will be, for a while. But I think people are starting to know this. But the grief that I felt
Mm.
for humanity, I mean, I would cry just knowing the pain before people would pass on, just that they didn't even know, and yeah, and we're not through it, that's the thing. But I think I'm glad to have had a wake up call early enough to do my own process, so that for those who are now starting to go, oh my God, I've been lied to, or whatever, that I can be more present, not
Yeah.
full of my own pain of processing it. It's It's a
And
journey.
one of the beautiful things about constellation work is that there's an intelligence behind the process. So the process itself, somehow we open a doorway in a very positive way to guidance and helpers and spirit realms. And we get directed towards what is needed for each particular client. And sometimes it is childhood trauma. Like sometimes it's the inner little boy or inner little girl, and their needs are just so blatantly ignored, or they've been ostracized because the childhood pain was so much, so the client had to disconnect. But sometimes we also see that it does go back to mom, and let's say mom was sexually abused, and it really broke mom's heart. It was her grandfather or something like that, and so she's never been able to be happy or in positive relationship, a loving relationship. And so the client, let's say her daughter comes in and she's like, gosh, I can't find a happy and loving relationship, just like my mom, right? Just like my mother. And so, but the intelligence of the field will direct us to which level. And sometimes it can even go more mystical and go into the past life realms. It's a little less rare, a little more rare for me to see that. Maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 15 constellations I lead. And then we can also go to the shamanic level, which is when we get into the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the high vibration and low vibration. And, and this can come into play. So it's the beauty of this process. And in addition, we have 10 people channeling these energies all at the same time. And that's a really powerful mechanism to shift the energies that we hold in our bodies and the bonds that we have to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, or past lives. Clean those bonds up so they're not toxic any longer. So there's a flow of love instead of a flow of trauma.
Right. And this is when you lead groups doing the constellation. Yeah, that I would think that would be so powerful. Yeah.
And I'll name to your audience also, there's a Netflix show, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there's a Netflix show. They did a dramatization where constellations are the base of it. And it's actually a dramatization. It's really well done. It's a Turkish show, and it's called Another Self. So if anybody wants to get like a pretty fun, pretty enjoyable a demonstration of the work, and then Gwyneth Paltrow did a documentary through Sex, Love, and Goop, episode 5, where she does constellation work too. So I love for people to have a visual presentation of the work.
Yeah. I'll have to. I don't have a television, but one day I say.
Good for you. Good for you.
One day.
Good for you.
So I mean, we got like a few more minutes left.
Sure.
Any last comment you'd like to share about either your work or the time period, whatever it is you want?
Yeah. I want to share with you the mouse experiment. It'll take about 2 minutes, and then I'll share how it relates. So I think it's Emory University did an experiment with mice. So I want people, maybe listening to this, to think about the trauma that's in our bodies. And we always think it's our trauma. And Emory University did this experiment where they took a male mouse and they gave it a slight electric jolt, and they give it a scent of cherry blossoms. And they did this repeatedly until the male mouse, just with the scent of the cherry blossoms, would go into a bit of a trauma response. As it wasn't being shocked, it wasn't being jolted, but he would go into this trauma response. They took the sperm out of that mouse and impregnated a female mouse. She didn't have anything to do. She didn't talk to this male mouse. They didn't have conversations. He didn't share a story with her, but just the sperm. And then she had babies, and then she had grandbabies. And they exposed the grandbabies just to the scent of cherry blossom smell, and they responded with a trauma response.
Wow, I didn't know
So never had anything to do with it. And so, the Irish, the people come from Ireland, and grandmother had to leave because of the potato famine. And we find ourselves hoarding things in our house. We don't know why, but we can't stop hoarding things. Many times it's because our people didn't have anything. And the ancestral imprint of, I don't have anything. And I would just so desperately need food. I so desperately need sustenance to survive. Those imprint our DNA and imprint the energetics, and we inherit them. And we just think it's about us. So, what I would close with is many times it's not just childhood trauma. Yeah. It's ancestral trauma, and it's no small piece. It's actually a really big piece of our struggles. In the US, maybe in Canada also, because there's all these breaks in our lineages, because people migrated or immigrated, left under duress. We don't think about the ancestry much as relevance to our struggle, but it's very big. So, if people want to check it out, I lead events almost weekly, offer people, it's free to come and experience the work as a representative to take on the roles. So people are welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to share a physical experience of it.
Wonderful. I think I might join.
You are welcome also. You have a spot of honor. You have a spot of honor.
It's exciting. I love that it's that you're doing it as a group,
and we're doing it on Zoom. I need to name that also, right? We're doing it online.
Yeah. I know, because that's available to everyone. So
I have people from all around the world each time I have events now.
Yeah, that's great. That's very inspiring. Amazing. Okay, well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm really glad that we were able to talk. And thank you.
Great. Thank you, Manon. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.